Born and raised in South Dakota, Karlee Petersen has a natural passion for agriculture and the Western way of life that's been instilled from a very young age. With the appreciation of the sport of rodeo and putting it into play on screen, Karlee has used her skill set learned at school in various roles throughout the industry to capitalize on television production and bring rodeo to the major platform. With education being a major focus for Karlee, she takes any opportunity to learn from others. Karlee has spent time with Bass Pro Shops producing photo shoots and national commercials to expand her knowledge and recently brought that back to the Western world, becoming the executive producer of the Cowboy channel. Karlee shares what's possible with positive thinking, hard work, and a little fatherly advice. Welcome to the Cowboy Up Podcast. This is where talk is all about the West, the spirit of the West, and especially the people and personalities that make up the West. This is brought to you by White Stallion Ranch and Cowboy Spirit Radio Productions. Russell, it's a glorious day. It is just spectacular outside. How are you doing?
Yeah, it's good. It's as good as it gets. February is the unpredictable month in Tucson. People say, what's the weather? Could be cold, could be warm.
Yeah, it could be both.
So it's warm and sunny today. So
and that's not a bad thing. And I know driving in, I saw the horses, and they look pretty happy.
Yeah, no, it's good weather for them.
Yes, it is. Yes, it is. Not too hot, not too cold. You know, Russell, I'm particularly excited today. We have got I think a media icon. She is a heavy hitter. I could go on and on. I mean, this is a lady who actually produced a Super Bowl commercial. And that's kind of remarkable, I think. And her name is Karlee Petersen, and she's currently the executive producer of the Cowboy channel. Karlee, thank you for joining us.
Well, hey, thank you for having me.
You know, I'm going over your resume here, and I get exhausted with people like you because you've done so much. What are you, about 130 years old?
It sure feels like it some days. No, it's been a fun career, and kind of my mantra is no boring days, and so I don't exactly know that I've ever had one, which is a positive thing for me for sure.
Well, between working with the Cowboy channel and Bass Pro Shops, I got to think you stay pretty busy.
I do. It's nice to be surrounded by good people, and it's you have two companies that are totally different but very similar in a lot of ways. Bass Pro Shops is still owned by Johnny Morris, and being an owner where it's not so corporate, you don't have as many corporate tendencies, and it's so much more of a family situation than it is, working for corporate America, and that's important to me. The same thing with Cowboy Channel. It was same thing. Patrick Gotch, who's founded it, and he was the owner for 5 years, obviously with RFD TV before that too, but working for two individuals that they have a lot of core values that align with yourself. It's easy to enjoy your work because you all have a pretty similar goal at the end of the day, is representing the industries that you love, and whether that's Johnny Morris in the outdoor world or Patrick Gotch in the Western industry and the agriculture side. So it's pretty cool when you're surrounded by people like that. And I know we don't have Patrick anymore, but he's still with us every day in spirit. So it's easy to enjoy what you do when you're surrounded by people like that.
Absolutely. Now, I know I love Bass Pro Shops. Really, I find it difficult to drive past a Bass Pro Shop without stopping in, because you're just surrounded by people that are there. Everybody has a smile on their face, both the customers and the staff. But the Cowboy channel is kind of near and dear to our hearts right here. Mm-hmm. And you bring a lot of that content, and the Cowboy channel brings a lot of that content. Can you talk about how you go about doing that, how you decide what gets on the air, how do you decide what people want to see?
You bet. Yeah, so we're the official network of the PRCA, and so that really is our main focus. At the end of the day, so far, we'll broadcast 700 plus performances a year. And so we're covering hundreds of rodeos every single year, and that really does seem to be kind of our backbone of the network. However, we also do a lot of focus in things like the NCHA, the NRCHA, so the cutting, the reining. We have a large audience and sponsor side of things in horse racing. So we're really involved in AQHA horse racing. That's probably not talked about enough. Additionally, with Western Sports Roundup is our very much our sports center of the Cowboy channel. And then we have shows like Pro Rodeo Tonight. We have Zero In. So Zero In is it's the nerdy show. It's the cool stat show where you get to not just talk about this guy won this and this guy won this, but hey, this guy didn't do so hot this week. And so there's a lot of different shows that when you're looking at the programming grid, the big thing that we know when we look at our numbers is that people are not just watching the network one day a week. People are watching multiple times a week, and that means that they like what they see on regular occurrence, which is typically rodeo and live events. And so with that, by nature, we're going to prioritize that because we see that the people like to watch rodeo and they like to see different events going on at night. They like to see repeats in the afternoon if they couldn't watch it that night. They like to see Western Sports Roundup later at night after the rodeo if they weren't home in time to watch it. And so that really is where we try to focus it is, end of the day, just like you guys and everybody else, you got to see what your people want to see and listen to, and that's how you make your decisions.
You know, I can't help it whenever I'm just spinning around the dial looking for something. If I hit upon a rodeo, even if it's a rodeo I know for a fact I've seen before, mm-hmm. I'm going to stay on that channel.
Yeah, you know what you're getting. You know, there's so many different TV shows out these days, and just random, just so much, you know, things can be so dramatic on TV. And so I think something that was very important to Patrick, and very much still is today, is, you know, when people tune into the Cowboy channel, they know what they're getting. They know they're going to get to watch rodeo, and they know they're going to get to see cowboys and cowgirls compete for money and see these beautiful, incredible equine athletes and get to listen to the rodeo announcers and the clowns and see the people there. And the cool part about putting that many rodeos on TV is in the beginning of this, there was always kind of this feeling and fear that by the Cowboy channel broadcasting so many rodeos, it was going to take away people from going to the rodeo. Well, it's done just the opposite. You know, ever since rodeo's been on Cowboy channel and people getting to see these locations, rodeos are a destination. You know, every one of these rodeos is so unique for a different reason, and it has a lot to do with the community that hosts the rodeo. And so now we're seeing record numbers at these rodeos, and Cowboy channel is not taking credit for that, but at all. But it is interesting to see how when we do our surveys throughout the year, a lot of people have, when they're watching the network, 68% of the people watching in 2023, I believe it was, when we did that survey, said that they plan to go to a rodeo the next year, that fall or something. So not only are people enjoying what they see, but they want to be a part of it. And that to me is what's so special, because not only are we getting them to watch it, but now we're getting them involved in it.
Right. And, you know, that concern, though, is music's had it.
Mm-hmm.
Movies have had it. And they're always wrong. It's always wrong. The exposure drives the demand, and what you just described is exactly what happens. And, you know, I've been to a fair amount of rodeos and you know, been to Tucson Rodeo countless times, and we're about to have our 100th, hopefully. I assume that's going to be on the Cowboy channel. But
yep, it is.
One of the big midwinter rodeos, I guess, one of the biggest period. And you know, they do that rodeo in a really big arena, and they, you know, long score lines, and meaning that they give the cattle a long head start for people who don't know rodeo. But so that those rodeos look a lot different than, say, the NFR that's held indoors in a tiny arena, relatively tiny, and, you know, basically short scores and lots of quick action. So people will get to see the same people often, but in very different situations. Kind of a bad analogy would be watching somebody play tennis on clay and then hard surface. It's just a different ball game, but it's the same game. It
is. It's cool to see the different I really enjoy seeing the different backdrops. So when you see rodeos, like you're at Tucson, and I mean, the sun's usually out, and that's a very cool deal because the arena's huge there.
Yeah,
but then also
giant.
you see places like, because then you'll see the bucking horses, and that's a long run back for those rough stock guys. But then you'll see rodeos like in Ellensburg or St. Paul, and you're like, wait, they're surrounded by mountains, and that's because they're in the northwest, excuse me. And then you see rodeos like in Texas, and then you see rodeos all over the place, and they've all got something pretty special about them. But with that too, these people are not only following the Cowboys, they're following the stock. And so they're really enjoying getting to see these, like you said, it's a lot of the same Cowboys, but it's also a lot of the same bucking horses and bucking bulls too. And people are starting to kind of pay attention to that. And so that's kind of been fun to see as well.
It's been really enjoyable to me. Now we have a rodeo that Russell does here at the ranch, and what he does is we've got a couple of small events, but actually not that small. But Russell explains the history of rodeo and some of the rules that surround rodeo, and he really draws people in because I didn't know there were rules to participate in a rodeo, especially to the extent they are. I mean, down to the dress code.
Yeah. That's one thing about people like Russell. Thank goodness for him, because we need those people that are going to take the time to describe that correctly. There's a lot of times that we just kind of expect people to get it, and there's a lot of things to know in rodeo. When people go to a PBR event, there really is only one rule that they need to know. They stay on for 8 seconds and they win money, or they don't stay on for 8 seconds and they lose. And that's not the case in rodeo. You have 7 different events, and every event has different rules. And so thank goodness for people like Russell that are taking the time to educate the fans and not just cheer because they're cool cowboys and cowgirls, but actually know what they're cheering for.
Yeah, and these are athletes, both the animals and the participants. They're both athletes.
Yeah, absolutely, they are. There's so many people that they'll talk about. My horse gets better care than I do. Or my horse has more self-care than I do, and they take more supplements than a human does, and that's the truth. I mean, these are equine athletes. They're the absolute highest performers. Every single event requires a bit different of an ability. And so you not only have, equine athletes that are just all-stars in themselves, but then you see kind of the different specialties that each horse does, and you see the time and effort that people have put in to have that certain skill set. And then maybe they do a little crossover, and there's a lot there, especially on the bucking horse and the bucking bull side. The care that the rough stock animals get is incredible. And these horses are turned out in pasture more than they are in the arena. People don't realize when a bucking horse is going, people think these horses get bucked, or bulls do, multiple times a week. Bucking horses probably buck 2 times a week. That's literally 16 to 20 seconds of work. And the rest of the time, they're being taken care of. They're being fed well. They're being out in the pasture, enjoying their time. So there's a lot there on the rough stock side too, that along with the timed event horses, they all they're equine athletes in themselves, and you could go on all day long about them.
That kind of sounds like a description of my brother-in-law, but I digress.
Well, talking about the bulls, my brother, who's a longtime PRCA timed event guy, he said years ago to me, he said, if they don't ratchet in their very effective breeding program on these bulls, it's going to get to where nobody can ride them. And, it's kind of getting almost that way. And you watch NFR and the very best of the best. And, out of 15, how many ride on a typical night and get to that 8 seconds? Just every single ride's phenomenal. So they are athletes, and if they don't quit breeding them like that, it's going to get to be a little
more one-sided.
A little too one-sided. We want to see a few rides. So you produce the NFR? Is that?
So I oversee. So we have 10 hours of live programming every day, and I oversee our team. And so I kind of joke around, but it's also pretty true. I just put out fires at the NFR. I've got, especially this past year, I've mentioned this a few times. That was easily the strongest team I've ever had. This was my 9th NFR, and it was my 5th with Cowboy Channel. So it was, in those 5 years, I was easily the strongest team I've ever had. I have producers assigned to every show, editors assigned to each show, videographers, full crew, talent, everything. And obviously that's a multi-month process to get that lined out. But yeah, so my job is to oversee it and basically fix problems at the NFR.
Remarkable.
Well, after being, in the stands multiple times over several years, unlike a lot of things Cowboys are involved in, that thing runs like a Swiss watch. And,
yes.
And I was involved with different groups over different years. So we had some, not on the television side, but some access to some of that stuff. And I'm just astonished at how well that thing is run.
My favorite NFR story. Are you guys familiar with the South Point in Las Vegas?
Absolutely.
It's got a huge equine center. So Michael Gaughan, they obviously do so much for the industry. And Michael Gaughan, the owner, we got to do an interview with him not that long ago. It was at the NFR this year. And I said, tell me about your first time going to the rodeo. And he said, honestly, I was never that interested in the rodeo. My wife drugged me to the first performance. And he said, I wasn't that interested because when I grew up going to rodeos in Omaha, these are 3.5 hours long, and every now and again you might see a good ride. And, it's very much just like the amateur rodeo that a lot of people grew up watching. And he said, so my wife drugged me to the first performance in 1985. It was the first year that the NFR was in Las Vegas. And he said, my wife drugged me to the first performance, and he said, my gosh, it's a 2-hour rodeo. It's the top Cowboys. Every ride was a great ride. It was a great run. I couldn't believe it. And so I went back the second night, and I looked at my wife and I said, I got to know who runs this. And he said, that's how I met Sean Davis. But it spoke so highly of, somebody of that magnitude that recognizes that, it's not just a cool event. It's not just a high level event. Like you're saying, the swiftness that it is run at, it sounds like from Michael Gaughan, it has been that way since 1985, and it just continues to blow people's minds to this day, as it should. Probably one of the most well-oiled machines there is.
Well, and it just is consistently that. They run it 10. This isn't a Super Bowl, I can't even imagine, but that's one day. They've got all the wind up, but they've got to re-gear up every single day and do this 10
For 10 days.
Yeah, there's no weakening, but we've kind of overrun our first half, so we're going to take a break, and we'll be right back.
Yes, indeed. We will be right back. My name is Stan the Radio Man, and about 5 years ago, as a longtime radio broadcaster, I finally said to my friend Russell, it really is time now for you to get on the radio and get involved in this podcasting work, because you are such a great storyteller and you have a lot of friends and guests. Let's do a program. And then Alan Day came along, and Lynn Weezy Sneed, and the Cowboy Up podcast was born, and it is now one of the long-going and one of the more popular podcasts all around. We have thousands of people just like you who listen and share and recommend the program to others, and we want to tell you how grateful we are for your friendship and your support. And we always love to hear from you, so if you reach out to us at the Cowboy Up Podcast at gmail.com, the Cowboy Up Podcast, gmail.com, tell us how we can serve you better. Perhaps you would even like to raise your hand and say, maybe I could be a guest on your program. And there's a possibility that you could be. And there's a possibility that you actually might know somebody who would be just one of the wonderful people that we have with Russell and Stephen, and sharing stories about Western lore, cowboy tradition, horses and dogs, and all things of the Western way of life. And maybe, just maybe, you say, Stan, do you think I could be like Russell, that I could maybe even have my own radio program? That is for sure a possibility. So why don't you even think about that in 2025, where you give your stories and your wisdom and your insight and truth and give it a voice that goes all around the world. I'd be happy to tell you how we can help you do just that. Just reach out to me at stanhouston@gmail.com, stanhouston@gmail.com. Thank you for your time. Thank you for listening. And of course, now it's back to the program.
You know, Karlee, I look at how rodeos are run, and it seems like an incredible marriage between entertainment and athletics. And, and I look at that, then I think about, and I have to ask the question, how in the world do you accomplish 100 rodeos in 100 days? I know you're the executive producer of that, but I can't imagine the amount of work that is.
Yeah, so we started that in 2021, and it's been, every year is a feat. And every year brings new challenges because we're always trying to, up level what we did last year. There still is the most entertaining stories from 2021 because when we started it that year, everybody had talked about it being an idea, especially in May. We said, what do we think about this, and et cetera, et cetera. Well, mid-June, one day we were down doing a feature at the Resistol factory. And Patrick called me and said, I need you back at the studio. We need to visit. And I said, okay, we'll finish up the feature and head back. And he said, no, I need you back right now because I need you on a plane at 5 o'clock tomorrow morning. I've decided we're going to do 100 rodeos in 100 days, and I need you to leave tomorrow to Reno. I said, okay, we'll be there soon. So we went back, we got on the plane the next morning, and we did it. We started off with Reno, and we basically were on the road from mid-June to the end of September. And that in that time, I think, is when the switch really flipped of what Cowboy Channel was actually capable of. I think before that, we had an idea of what we could be one day. And then when we were on location and we made those relationships with rodeos, and the rodeo committees could see the power of Cowboy Channel, and we could see the power of these rodeos not just being a rodeo, they're a destination, and we got to get people here, and et cetera, et cetera. Once we started to do that, we also saw the capabilities of what we could do with technology. And so the technology side of it is, at the end of the day, that's what allows us to do this many rodeos. I mean, we call it 100 rodeos, but we'll do closer to 150. And the way that we do that is A, an extremely hardworking crew, and B, is we have this piece of equipment. It's about the size of an iPad, and it's called an encoder. And the nice thing about that is that I don't have to have a crew at 150 different rodeos. I can send an encoder, and the production company that the rodeo committee has hired, we plug in our encoder basically to the feed that they're putting up on their Jumbotron, and that sends a signal back to my studio, and that's how I broadcast the rodeos. So I'll have a crew in the studio basically 24 hours a day during that time. However, the lucky thing for me is I only send a crew out definitely to the top 10, top 13, because those are the bigger productions by nature. But if we do an on-location pre-show and et cetera, so those encoders really have become a huge tool in the success of Cowboy Channel because they've allowed us to not have to have this humongous crew of people, but be able to work with the production teams. And the production teams deserve a lot of credit too, because they have worked hard to up-level what they're doing. They just went from being on the Jumbotron to being on national television. And so these production companies, they're hired on by the rodeo committees, and they really have done a beautiful job of working with us and transitioning and doing a nice job to make not just a Jumbotron show, but a TV show too.
The logistics behind this have got to be mind-numbing, and I know as you're explaining to us, you're explaining the encoder. Russell and I are looking at each other, just shaking our heads, like, "Are you kidding me?"
I was going to ask how many's in the crew, and it's a laptop.
Not that many.
Yeah, it's amazing.
Because I think I've got a crew. I think Cowboy Channel is around 60 to 65 people. It's not that big, and so now obviously people do a lot of things, but everybody in the industry does. But also, those encoders, I think we've got 30 or 40 of them, and so we can be in a lot of places at a lot of times.
Well, I've got to think that they went very deep in your education on encoders. Of course, I'm kidding.
Yeah, that was a mini engineer lesson one afternoon when I said, "How do we do this?"
So I have a question for you, sort of off topic. Yeah, have you ever gone to the RFD range outside Albuquerque?
Oh my gosh, yeah, it's a beautiful place. We do a lot of sales. We would do a lot of sales summits there.
So we looked at that ranch. I went with Patrick and a friend to view that ranch while he was still talking to Don Imus about buying it. And
oh my gosh.
Yeah, my partner Jay and I opened that for Patrick, and so we got to know him. I was there for the first week it was open for Patrick and many of his family and guests, and it's a kind of a one of a kind place. I mean, some of it doesn't quite make sense to me, but it sure got its spectacular aspects. And so I knew Patrick's single-minded focus on bringing entertainment and representing the rural lifestyle, and which includes lots of things, rodeo being one of them. But I read somewhere, I think, that the Cowboy Channel and Patrick died, for those who I don't know, not
May of last year.
May of last year.
Yep.
So not very long ago. And I read, I think, that the Cowboy Channel was sold, spun off. Is that?
Yeah. So Patrick had been having conversations with Teton Ridge for a while, and that is kind of a big myth about this whole situation, is that he passed away and it got sold, and that just is very much not true. And so Patrick had a lot of conversations with Teton because he knew they were coming in and investing in the industry, and obviously they had reached out to him previously, and he also had gotten to a point. I mean, this man had worked for his whole life, and he had created so much. The man had slept maybe 3 hours a night. Like, he was always on the road. He's 70 years old. At some point, he said, "I think I want to, maybe slow down for not a whole lot, maybe for 5 minutes, but, just a little." And he knew that Cowboy Channel was very much in its growing phase, and so what was next for it? Well, when Patrick was having the conversations, obviously they lasted a while because Patrick was not just going to sign on the dotted line without knowing that Teton Ridge was going to continue Cowboy Channel and representing the industry and representing Cowboy Channel the way that he created it and with the intentions that he did. And so he was very adamant about that, and rightfully so, because he had created something very special and very near and dear to a lot of people in this industry's hearts. And so that had to remain the same. So once everybody was very much on the same page, and he had full trust in everyone. And so in the middle of those is when he passed, in May of last year, unfortunately. And so, the daughters, they had to pick up the pieces in a really big way. Gatsby and Raquel, they're very impressive individuals, and they don't get near enough credit as they should. Because they've done a lot with RFD TV and Cowboy Channel over the years. And then when Patrick passed, the way that they stepped in and completely just took control and handled situations, was something really remarkable. And so the girls had ended up finishing the sale for Patrick, after he had passed. And then it was finalized in November of 2024.
Hey, so sort of a follow-up. I'm kind of unclear on what Teton Ridge is. I know that they're very dedicated to promoting the Western lifestyle. What are they?
So essentially, think of it this way. So, and I'll start with Cowboy Channel, and it'll make sense for the others. So when Teton acquired the Cowboy Channel, they did not acquire the Cowboy Channel to change Cowboy Channel to Teton Ridge. They came in to be the new parent company of Cowboy Channel. So like how Rural Media Group was the parent company of Cowboy Channel previously, Teton Ridge is now the parent company of Cowboy Channel. Right. Just like Teton Ridge is now the parent company of Cowboys and Indians. Teton is the parent company of the American. So essentially they really are, they're this parent company of a lot of different things, but they have goals of being involved in every area of the industry. And they brought in a lot of people with the goal of look at what the Western industry is at today and figure out how to grow it way bigger. Because there's a lot of opportunities in this space, in this industry. And so they saw those opportunities, and end of the day, they're business people. I mean, and they're smart business people, but they're also not afraid to ask direct questions and ask a lot of questions about the industry and why do we do things the way that we do and how do we do things. And so when you have those conversations with them, it's nice to see that, yes, they are this parent company, that they own a lot of things, and they're very involved in every sector, whether it's competition or print magazine or the American with their event or the Cowboy Channel now or the podcast, Let's Freakin' Rodeo, etc. So they're obviously involved in all areas, but the good thing and the respectable thing about them is they'll ask direct questions to make the right moves.
Remark.
Can I just ask one follow-up to that? In our business, Yellowstone, the Costner show, and Taylor Sheridan's phenomenal success, is credited with a renewed interest in the West. How do you think Teton Ridge fits into that? I think the bigger interest.
Very much. Yeah, I mean they're capitalizing on it, and they should be. There's more people today. They did the fake cutting setup in New York City on the streets because they saw the romanticism that New Yorkers and that city people have for the Western industry, and they said, here's an opportunity. And so they didn't just show, a horse or something like that. They had Adon Vanuelos and Bella Hadid on the streets of New York City and Bromba's Western Furniture, and they did a cutting setup. They had an arena set up and everything, literally shut down a street. So to me, they're doing the right thing. They saw, and it's the Yellowstone effect. There's no question about it. But they're seeing that and they're saying, okay, let's get in the middle of that. They're not just saying, oh, that's cool, we're glad to have them.
Karlee, I look at what you do. I mean, you're doing graphics, visual content, marketing, creative. You're involved in really every aspect of what goes on there. How did you get started doing this? Because I can't imagine when you were 4 years old and riding around on your tricycle that you thought, hey, when I grow up. So how did you get started doing this?
Sure. So TV was never the plan. I grew up rodeoing, and our family was really big in, we did a lot of horse trading, and so we'd buy a lot of horses, fix them, and sell them. And so I grew up in a sale barn and in the arena. And I went to college on a full ride rodeo scholarship at University of Wyoming, and I wasn't actually introduced to TV till my sophomore year of college. So really not that long ago when you put it into that perspective. So the way I got into it was my sophomore year of college, my freshman year of college, I was at the college finals in Goat Tyne. So I was familiar with college finals. It was right there in Casper, 2 hours down the road from Laramie. Then my second year of college, I did not make it back, and I randomly landed this internship with the crew that was hired on by ESPN2. Because all of these, ESPN, ESPN2, ESPN1, Fox, everybody, they hire production companies out to go and do a lot of these broadcasts. Rarely will they all be in-house. And so the production company and I got to talking, and they needed basically some like rodeo insight kind of stuff. And then I wanted to go back to college finals, and they said, well, we'll teach you TV. And so I went, and I honestly didn't have much expectation. I thought it was cool to be back at college finals. I was getting to intern. I was getting paid to intern. And so I was there. And it ended up being, I think on day 2, I was like, this is the coolest thing ever. This is all that I want to do. How in the world is it possible that I get to still be involved with rodeo, the sport that I know and love and grew up in and is my favorite sport in the world, and also get to make a living off of it? And so I didn't really know what that looked like, because at the time Cowboy Channel didn't exist. Cowboy Channel didn't come along until 2019, and this would have been 2017. And so at that time I didn't know what it looked like, but I knew that this was TV is the coolest thing ever. So from there, luckily they took me to, that production team took me to the NFR that year. And so, so that would have been the start of my junior year. And then my junior year I was still rodeoing. And so I did some freelance here and there. I got to work with WCRA. That got me involved with the rodeo, or with the contestant side of it, getting to know them. Cause I was doing a lot of check-in and events and things like that. And then my senior year, I had so many freelance gigs in TV or events that I chose not to rodeo that year, and negotiated a deal with my professors that I would go to school Tuesday, Wednesdays, and then I was on the road every weekend doing a different freelance gig. So then, my spring of my senior year, I got a phone call from a guy named Joe Lavero, which is full circle because we work together again now. Called me and he said, "Hey, I heard you know a little about TV and a little about rodeo." And I was like, "Yeah, sure." And he said, "Well, we're starting the Cowboy Channel, and do you think you'd want to move to Texas and help us start it?" And I was like, and I'm in Wyoming at the time. I said, "Well, yeah, I guess so. Sounds like a plan to me." And so, I skipped college graduation and moved to Texas. And I knew my new boss, and that was it when I moved to Texas. I didn't know anybody, and that was June of 2019. And so I would think I was probably the third or fourth employee at Cowboy Channel. And then, and it was me and Joe, Patrick, of course, one on-air talent, and an editor. And that was it. And so it was pretty crazy to see. We didn't have a finished studio at that point. Nothing. And so, to say the least, we've done a lot in a very short amount of time. But it's been a fun ride. And there's, like I said, there hasn't been a boring day. And I keep going back to, my dad has always told me too, I'm always been lucky to be surrounded by the right people. And I think it's important that you recognize that. And I remember my dad would always tell me, he said, "Karlee, people work their entire lives for the stars to align just one time." To just try to get them to align one time. And he's like, "Your stars won't do anything but align." And so he's like, "If you do not take advantage of this, you're making a mistake." And so it was always in the back of my head that it's like, this keeps working for me. Why is it working for me and not for anyone else? And so I have to be very mindful of that and keep grinding. And I can't let a day go by that I'm not, being mindful that my stars continue to align. And I have to be very thankful for this, because this is not the case for everybody. And I'm very aware of that. I got very, very lucky.
Well, and lucky, as you've described, it comes with work clothes on it. So
lots of work.
and I don't think you have a lot of 40-hour weeks. I think maybe they extend a little bit longer than that.
Yeah, yes, a few more.
Well, my uncle, our family's from Wyoming more than we're the outcasts in Arizona. But my uncle, who was a very successful person and widely respected, one of his main mantras was, "The harder I work, the luckier I get." And I just think there's so much wisdom in that. And but we've run out of time, and so we've stolen. We know you're busy. We've seen the.
I see resume. I can see how busy she is.
Yeah, we've seen the resume as sort of a book. So thank you for this, and it was really fun. And I'll say something I've said many, many times about rodeo, and I think you, as a participant and a person who puts rodeo in front of the world, it's the sport of significance that remains one that people do for the right reasons.
It is.
It's all about the money so they can get to the next rodeo. It's not all about the money so they can buy the mansion in Beverly Hills. It's
right.
And I think people play basketball, baseball, and everything because they love it too, but they lose sight of that because of the mountains of money that gets attached, and I've lost sort of, I'm a recovering fan of most of those things, but rodeo, I think that's the other side of the coin, that they're not getting rich, is that they're still doing it for all the right reasons.
I couldn't agree more. And I think the cowboys and cowgirls that are involved in that are the perfect description of that.
Absolutely.
Karlee, we so appreciate your time. Thank you very, very much.
Thank you, guys. It was a blast.
Indeed it was, and as we often say, you learn more here by accident than most places by design. So thank you all for making this possible. The Cowboy Up podcast is brought to you by a number of good folks, but one of them right now is right where we are at, and that is at the White Stallion Ranch in Tucson, Arizona. Now, the True Ranch Connection, we have a number of friends and affiliates and other ranching places and spaces and good times, so we have a place for you. This is an ideal time to come to the Great Southwest. We have the Tucson Book Festival coming up. Spring training is coming, and my, what a wonderful time that can be. And maybe you could spend a few days with a Cowboy Up experience. Well, we can help you, so why don't you reach out to us at whitestallion.com. That's whitestallion.com. Check out all the stories and pictures and good times. Who knows, while you're here, we might even have you on the program. So thank you for being a part of the Cowboy Up podcast, friends, adventurers, and people who truly want to save Western civilization by keeping the Western tradition and the cowboy spirit alive. Till next time, all the best and blessings to you. Ride tall, ride safe, take care of one another, and do good work. And bye for now.